Hello, good evening, and welcome to the War Room. This is day 3 of Russia's, well, frankly, illegal incursion into the Ukraine, a sovereign, liberated territory, now being attacked on 3 sides by the Russian Federation. The world is not taking this lightly. They're not sitting down and taking this either, despite what our president has done. We can debate that, but he really doesn't have much to stand on. Anyway, as per usual, I have started in here by myself because I tend to drag in the panelists, and I've decided that we were going to do this every day until this was over. And it's hard to explain the amount of work involved to do such a thing because my day started this morning at 7 a.m. ish, and it was just fact finding and story corroboration, um, just so we make sure that we get it right. Because usually in situations like this, there's a lot of propaganda and counter propaganda. So, like for instance, the winning side will always put out bigger numbers, and the losing side puts out smaller numbers because that's where you get misinformation. It's like they don't want you to think they're losing as many units as possible, while the other side's talking about killing more people than they actually have. Stuff like that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started because these shows tend to always run super long. Uh, my original intent was to try to do this as an hour-long program, and so far I haven't even been able to keep it under 2. So, in an effort to try to move things along, we're going to go ahead and get to the getting. We've got a lot to cover today, and hopefully my panelists will start to chime in a bit more so I can give my voice box a break just a bit, because I'm pretty sure you're tired of just hearing from me all the time. I do see you guys in the chat, so good evening to Squibload and Al W. Actually, Squib was probably in here way earlier, but I think he has a night job too, so he'll probably check in from time to time. Anyway, let's go ahead and start bringing in my panelists. So my first panelist, I'll do this in the same order that I always do it in, is Galileon Gonzalez, which was also known as Zorro117 back in the good old-fashioned Gun Channels days. So
What's
he's
up,
here.
everyone?
Oh, good, you are here. I didn't want to drag you in unannounced, but good, you're here. Excellent. So he comes to us from the great state of California, and before you judge, he's a man of the land. He's a rancher. He's a gun owner. He's, a personal patriot type thing. So why would he do that right now? Like the dude sending I'm getting private messages from my other panelists knowing that I can't check them on, anyway. Hang on, just give me just a sec. I will smack him later for this. What the hell is so important that you have to tell me this? Oh, okay. Fine. Alright, so my next panelist, I guess I'll just drag him in now so I can chastise him for it. Mike, Night Strike. You know him from Hit or Miss Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock. Usually there would be like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes a Sunday Night Strike, depending on if the mood suits and time allows. But I've sort of, I don't know how to say this, I've sort of annexed him when we started doing this War Room format. And I'm glad to have him because, the more the merrier.
I'd like to say it's a mutual agreement, not instead of an annexation.
That
Because,
reminds me, I gotta fix your volume. There you go.
you need to fix the volume on the output because the output is really low.
Just yours was because I had you personally muted down a little bit from when I was at work. But long story. I fixed you though. You'll
Okay.
come in just fine now. Actually, let
Alright.
me make sure I got Jaime the same way. There we go. All right, so you guys will probably come in just fine. All right, so my next panelist is Scott P79, who just picked up some pretty sweet mags today for his AK. He's a tradesman. He's up in the New England Northeast, past that actually, probably freezing his ass off. So right now, even though he has a camo set of Adidas tracksuit gear, he probably wishes he had my sober and Oman winter gear to wear.
Nah, because I'm not homo.
I got the sober one, so it'll look like COBP. Anyway, he says volume overall is low. Had to turn it up. And well, yeah, if you have your gain on only 50. Anyway, I always turn mine up to 100, so of course I'm going to sound fine on mine. All right, my next panelist is the Warsaw Patriot. You probably known him from Hit or Miss and probably from Zeke Shoots. So he is our Polish contingent, actually, but he does live here in the United States. And he is quite versed in hardware, AKs, and geopolitical events. So we're glad to have you too.
Anytime you want me on, man, just give me an invite.
Well, I thought FNH was going to join, but he bailed.
Oh, jeez. I
It's
told him
okay.
if he wanted to come on.
That's fine. I guess we'll just roll with this then. So, I did something a little different. I know I said I wasn't going to make a mockery or a joke of this, but the splash screen that you see today in the war room, I had to share it just because it's kind of funny. It is kind of funny, but it's not like making a
Black Sea,
mockery.
not Russia.
Yeah.
Still not Russia.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
nope.
Also
still
no.
not. Also not Russia.
Yeah, I
Nope.
like that.
And also, this is not.
Yeah.
Nah.
Baltic Sea, not Russia.
I like the nah.
Yeah. Like those I think it's very fitting. So
It is.
in case there's any Russians watching this, despite the fact that you poor bastards all got demonetized today, I just gave you a map to sort of remind you where you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to stay in your own lane, bro.
You're supposed to be in that red part.
Yeah,
just
that,
FYI.
that red part right there, that's where you're supposed to be. And because your tankers lost gas today, a very nice Ukrainian man offered to tow them back. But anyway, and that wasn't a joke. That was a serious thing.
I know it's serious, but that made me, spill some water.
Oh, yeah. So, for now, we do have a lot to cover. I try to cover it for the day of, so you'll have to excuse me because towards the end of the show, I would have crossed midnight their local time, but not our time. So, for me, this information is still day 3, despite the fact that right now, at the moment that we're talking to you, it's already 4:37 a.m. Sunday, Ukrainian local time. So some of the stuff you're going to hear tonight is actually day 4 information, but I'll just skip that for tomorrow. Maybe I'll just kind of rehash it slightly just as like a quick reminder. But
Maybe just a little.
well, I mean, if time allows, because I really don't want to do these beyond 2 hours. It's amazing that people are coming to watch this in the first place, and that they have the attention span to stick around for 2 hours. So anyway, somebody pointed out something to me yesterday, which I found kind of ironic. I had said that for some reason, everything we put on this program so far shows up in mainstream news the day after, like actual verbatim phrases that we used. And I thought, wow, those unoriginal bastards are taking my material, or your material, or Patriot's material, or Scott's material. And I'm just like, that's amazing, because that means they're watching, but they're not subscribing. Thanks, Fox News. Anyway, okay, so this he keeps saying my volume's low. Let me turn up the master gain here, and hopefully that fixes it. And if it doesn't, then you're just going to have to crank up your bell tones, because if I do it any louder, then Mike's input's going to blow my eardrums out.
No, I won't do that.
Don't do your ending of your show. I knew you were doing that. So anyway, let me move my mic a little closer too.
Well, at least people know me.
Yeah. Okay, so if the volume's still low after this, I'll try to fix it for tomorrow's broadcast, but as far as I can hear in my own, like, mixer coming back at me, this is perfectly fine. But anyway, like I said, we got a lot to cover today. Just for a brief format show kind of a reminder, we go through everything that happened for that day's information that was put out. The little scroller at the bottom, it's really limited in the characters I can use, but if I did everything that I wanted to put into there, you would never get the information, because it would never get to the point where you'd get to the end of it. So we usually just talk about all the bullet points of the show. I just gave you the casualty list, basically. Figures. Anyway, so today, 2 a.m. So this was just at the time that I was getting ready to go to bed from the last show. and that would have been 10 a.m. Ukrainian time. Italy and Cyprus both announced that they had agreed not to block Russia's expulsion into SWIFT, or from SWIFT, which is the international banking, right? So for those of you who aren't aware, uh, think of it as PayPal for countries for purchases, inter-country or international PayPal, for countries. So for instance, 65% of 65% of Germany's energy is being purchased through Russia. So they would, make the transaction through SWIFT, essentially.
Theor-
Go
You
ahead.
said energy. Theoretically, could they also cut off Europe's power grid? This is their electricity.
I'm not certain because the thing is they're the Germans are buying oil
The oil,
and
right?
natural
Correct.
gas. They're not buying
Electricity,
actual electricity.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Where do you get the electricity from?
They're burning the
Electricity
oil or
plant.
the natural gas to spin up their generators.
Generators,
Yeah.
right?
And then the other thing is I sort of think that the EU has fallen into a similar but not as absurd trap as the United States, where I'll just use my state as an example. Texas has 2 nuclear reactors in its state. They're literally running at less than 5% capacity. We have, I think, enough natural gas power plants to power about 45% of the state's needs, and they're running at less than 30% capacity. And the reason that was done was because of lily-livered liberals pushing this Green New Deal bullshit, and we ended up having someone put in charge that cut all output from natural gas, coal, and nuclear power in Texas to make room for wind and solar. And for anybody who watched the news last year in Texas, the power grid failed and 40 something people died because they froze to death. And I didn't have power in my area for like 5 or 6 days because they couldn't get the reactors. First of all, they couldn't get authorized to crank the reactors back up to higher capacity, and they couldn't fire up the CNG plants either by mandate. And all the solar panels were down, and there was no wind because it was a bomb cyclone. It was just this giant polar vortex overhead. There was no wind. It was just like sitting in a polar vacuum. But anyway, I digress. You were asking if they could cut the power off? No, but they could really make it difficult to keep the power going. See, Germany and Ukraine, and I'm sure several other European countries, they also have hydroelectric and they have nuclear. France has quite a bit of nuclear. So, in the event that Germany was hurting for energy or whatever, since they're on sort of like a national grid, I bet I bet France could crank up the reactor a bit. Probably. And right, yeah, see, Al's from Texas too, and he said that the grid also failed because the EPA wouldn't let us bring on the backups. The backups were other coal and natural gas plants to crank up, the output. But in the case of Europe, they have ways. I'm pretty sure they have ways.
They've got nuclear reactors.
Right, but so do we. But the thing
Mhm.
is Germany has been very quietly sort of opposed to expelling Russia from SWIFT because they don't want their tap cut off. Because, yes, they are quite energy independent on Russia. 65%. That's, no laughing matter. Um,
Like East Germany won.
but the funny thing is statistically last year, all transactions through SWIFT, only 1.5% of total transactions through SWIFT was from Russia. To or from Russia. So I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we're talking trillions of dollars going, back and forth through SWIFT, but only a couple of billion, which is, for the layman, that's a lot of money, right? But for a nation, that's probably a drop in the bucket, supposedly. I don't know. It's a lot to me. Either way, Italy and Cyprus, I guess, were holdouts, sort of, for a while, and they publicly announced yesterday at 10 a.m. Ukrainian local time that they would not block any attempt to expel Russia, which left Germany by itself, more or less. No one else really stepped forward and aired their grievances. So, anyway, about 4 hours later, the Prime Minister of Estonia Now, I would. I'm gonna try to point out on the map. I think it's up here in the Baltic states. They had
Yeah, Estonia is
announced.
in the Baltic.
Okay, okay. So they had announced at 2 p.m. Ukraine local time. It was 6 a.m. my time. So I was trying to get some sleep by then. Um, they had announced that all Russian airlines were no longer allowed to operate within its airspace. So they basically created a no-fly zone across their territory, and then they had publicly encouraged the rest of the EU to follow suit. That hasn't happened yet from the rest of the EU, but maybe by this time tomorrow we'll tell you that that happened too. That would be great.
I think the British have already done that also.
Right, but the Russians don't have to fly over Great Britain to get to where they want to go with the Ukraine. Militarily
No,
speaking.
that's true.
Commercial flights, yeah, you could say that that could still be a thorn in their
Well,
side.
that's what I mean. They're blocking commercial flights.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's probably part of the sanctions anyway.
Probably.
So, okay, so following that, about an hour later, so we're at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. Ukrainian local time. A morning photo made it to social media, and it was shared by President Zelensky to prove that he was still in country and refusing to leave his land and his people. So now into the third day of the conflict, British intelligence officials reported on Saturday that the bulk of Russian forces were still 18 and a half miles away from the center of the capital city. Now, they had been on the outskirts of it for a full day before that. Anyway, they also mentioned that Russia still had failed to gain total control and air supremacy over the Ukraine. And they had greatly reduced the Russian Air Force's impact because the Ukrainians are still fighting back in the air. This is the same Russia that tried to announce within the first 2 hours of their incursion that they had knocked out all Ukrainian anti-air defenses, and that the air belonged to them. The skies were theirs. Here it is, day 3, and even British intelligence is like, nope, yet. So that was kind of encouraging. The news today on the weekend, I really thought was going to be sort of slow, just because I thought journalism would take a day off too, but that's not the case. An hour later, 4 p.m. Ukrainian local time. Now, have you noticed that the leadership of Russia tends to play the shell game in terms of what position they hold in government? For instance, Vladimir Putin was the president of Russia, then the prime minister of Russia, then the president again, and you know how they play that little shell game? Well, former President Dmitry Medvedev posted on social media Saturday that we don't especially need diplomatic relations. It's time to padlock the embassies and continue contacts looking at each other through binoculars and gun sights. Now, the reason he's talking like this is because now he's a foreign minister of some sort for Russia. So he's still in a position of power, in a way. Anyway, he says that the sanctions are being imposed for one simple reason: political impotence arising from the West's inability to change Russia's course. He wrote this on the VK Network page, apparently shrugging off the economic measures that have been imposed on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Medvedev also said that the sanction gives the Kremlin a good reason to pull out of dialogue on nuclear stability, and that Russia's suspension from the Council of Europe human rights watchdog gives it an opportunity to restore their death penalty for both criminals and war criminals alike. What a turd burglar. I mean, he literally just gave up their game plan. So now nukes are not off the table, and now he's going to re-implement the death penalty for all the people he's capturing for protests as war criminals.
Well, here's the thing with him. He's Putin's puppet.
Yeah, well, they all are. But I mean, because he's such a good little lapdog, he keeps getting these positions where he gets to open his mouth like this.
No, he's literally Putin's puppet. Like when Putin was no longer the prime minister, Medvedev was.
Right. Yeah,
Who
they
do you
kept
think was
switching
actually
back and
pulling
forth.
the strings?
They
Yeah.
literally kept switching back and forth.
Yeah, because there's something with the Russians that they can't serve the amount of terms consecutively.
But now he can do whatever the hell he wants. Honestly, the one thing I'm actually
Yeah.
really surprised about is he's not pulling a Xi Jinping and declaring himself president for life. But that's
He
coming.
basically is.
That's
but he's
coming.
not.
Let's not kid ourselves. It's definitely coming. He'll say he
Yeah.
has to. He'll make up something saying that he's obligated to, and he has to see this through to the end, because because he has to denazify the Ukraine. So he says.
That's ironic because the current president of Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
is Jewish.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I thought was hilarious. Is he's talking about denazifying Ukraine and their president's Jewish. How does that work? I just whatever.
Who had like much of his family wiped out by the Nazis.
Of course. So anyway, Mister, I'm loading AK mags that I picked up today. I can hear it. So anyway, last night before I'd gone to bed, so there's not a timestamp on this one as far as I'm aware. The White House had authorized an additional $350 million in defense aid to the Ukraine. Biden and Harris held a call with the White House's national security team at 9 a.m. Central Time. So that would have been 10 a.m. their time. But no details came from that call. Like nothing. Not a peep. So we're really like the media is generally curious of, well, you had a phone call, so what happened? Because they don't really do press briefings on Saturdays. You never hear Jen Psaki on the stage on a Saturday. Probably because that's when she's out, in public, just in man-hate mode. But anyway.
Well, she is a ginger.
God, is she?
Soulless.
I know. 8:50, so 10 to 9 Central Time, 4:50 p.m. Ukraine time. Turkey had announced that it will cut off all Black Sea access to Russia towards the Ukraine. Turkish President Recep Erdogan will ban the passage of Russian warships into the Black Sea, Zelensky announced on Saturday morning. It would have been probably lunchtime for him. This announcement was denied by another Turkish official within half an hour, however. U.S. defense officials have not been able to confirm or deny either side's story. So, this is what's weird to me. The story says that the president of Turkey, the utmost authority of the country, said that he will do this. But one of his underlings said, no, we're not going to do that. If I was Erdogan, I would kick 7 levels of hell out of him and say, you shut your mouth, I'm your boss. So that way we can understand where they truly stand in this. See, the problem right now is everyone is this. We were talking about this in like the week in review and even here on our lobby chats throughout the week. But
Yeah.
every world war sort of starts the same way. There's an incursion into like a small country that isn't really historically like a mega power type thing, and
An
then
important figure dies.
and an important figure dies or is under the threat of death, and then like all the relationship countries around the area will sort of pick sides and then kick off a global war, right? So right now what everyone's trying to do is make sure we know where each nation stands. So when Turkey says we're going to do this and then somebody below him in his own government says no we're not, now we have to look at Turkey and go, are you friend or foe? Because we don't have time to fuck around right now.
Are you sure you're in NATO?
Yeah. Are you sure that you work for that guy who writes your checks and runs this country? That's basically what's going on. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to say you're going to prevent ships from entering the Black Sea when the ships are already in the Black Sea. They're already surrounding Ukraine on their coastline. They've already had Russian Marines do an
Oh.
amphibious operation last night.
I think the object is to prevent any more from coming in from the Mediterranean.
Okay. Well, no. See, that's the thing.
I know they got docks over
It's a-
there on the other side of Black
It's
Sea.
a very long trip, you see, to get to the Black Sea because you go through the Med, then you have to go through the Aegean, and then you have to go into the Black Sea. And there's a tiny little ocean in between too, but I can't remember the name of it offhand. So it's like, which part of that is Turkey going to control? I think it's that little bitty part between the Aegean and the Black Sea. And that would be
The one that goes
pretty
straight
serious.
through their country. That one.
Well, it skates over the top of it. That's the problem. Black Sea's just above them. So anyway, let's see. We got that one knocked out. 10 minutes later, so this is now 9 a.m. Central, 5 p.m. Ukraine time. The EU continues to push for Russia's expulsion from SWIFT. However, Germany is still being a bit of a holdout. Then somebody had posted something about this, and Germany got really upset and had the post removed. But it said, maybe somebody should remind them that Germany has not been an Axis alliance with Moscow since 1941 because Operation Barbarossa sort of fucked that all up. They got really pissed because, you're not supposed to talk about anything Nazi in Germany. Well, somebody in Germany posted that. They were like, maybe we should remind them that we haven't been an Axis ally of theirs since 41. And they would be correct. So the fact that they're holding out needs to stop. Like, fucking stop, Hit them across the nose with a rolled up newspaper wrapped in or soaked in water so it really stings. And get their shit together. But don't worry, I've got good news. It's coming up later in the feed. You're going to love it. It's part to do with this, so it's okay. An hour after that announcement, and this is the part that I know Warsaw's going to love. And I wish I could play the music, but I would get hit with a copyright strike. I would play you the theme song from the movie Convoy, because Poland sent an entire convoy of ammunition to the Ukraine that crossed into the border at 6 p.m. Ukraine local time. And on the lead truck, there was a card, handwritten, that said, "With our warmest regards to our neighbors in the Ukraine." How cool is that? They have been intaking in Ukrainian refugees desperate to get away from this war. And then, in a show of solidarity, they sent in the ammo trucks. And they probably sent in javelins and things like that too, because make no mistake, we're going to be feeding these kinds of weapons into them by proxy. Maybe not directly. We'll just airdrop them and leave them, around Polish air bases, and they can just scoop them up into trucks and drive them across.
Here's the thing I have a problem with.
Sure.
I'm devil's advocate on this because I can see both sides playing on this.
Okay.
All right, supplying our friends, even though Russia doesn't like it, could escalate the conflict because they are saying, "All right, NATO members, fuck off. I told you not to be part of this." On the other hand, the fucking Russians are doing the same thing with Chechnya and other nations that are supporting them. So, go in bigger on this part.
Yeah, and this is where escalation is going to run amok because, like you said, they're going to say, "Hey, you can't do that. You're supposed to be working with us to lower tensions." And we're going to say, "Funny, you've been telling the world for the last 3 months that you're not going to incur on Ukraine, and yet there you are. So why should we listen to you?" And they still have to prove the fact that we supplied it. There's not Uncle Sam logos on everything, right? Hopefully. You would think that if we were sending aid to the Ukraine directly, that we might even be, I don't know, nice enough to print in their own language on the boxes what it is, so they know how to distribute it quickly. Now, I know they speak English too. Let's not kid ourselves.
They speak English, and they can read English pretty well, too.
I know. It's just, sometimes you can just...
They're modernized. I know.
You can stencil the boxes in their language just to make it easier. You know what I'm saying? Like, just to speed things along. It doesn't hurt. It's just stencils and some
English.
It's some stencils and some Krylon, just done. I can't. Oh wait, sorry. If ViceScript Garage ever watches this, I'm sorry I stole your just now. Sorry.
They're not like the middle of Russia or like Siberia where they don't speak English. Okay.
Whatever. I'm just saying. Like your field operative and your floor commander in the Ukraine maybe doesn't. That's all I'm saying. Like if Cyrillic was the only thing he knew and Russian and Ukrainian languages were the only thing he knew, then it helps him, right? The military has to work at the lowest common denominator. Let's be honest, right? Everyone has to be able to just do what they're supposed to do as quickly and clearly and as fast as possible. And efficiently. Don't stencil the boxes. I just meant the crates, man. Alright, so anyway. Where did I leave off? Okay. So 10 minutes after that announcement... Or, sorry. I got that wrong. Let's see. 50 minutes after the convoys rolled in. Nope. Not that one either. Sorry.
No.
That's coming up. Reports as of 10 a.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Ukrainian local time, was that Russia had only 50% of its combat forces in country, with the other half still in reserve. So that means if you took all the forces in Ukraine right now that the Russians have brought in, it's about 75,000. That's quite a bit. You know, it's combat and support people. But they have the exact same number in reserves. So if this many troops and forces are making it this difficult to overtake the country, and there's been reports that Russia's very frustrated with the pace this is going, then you should expect to see the other half get pushed in pretty quickly. Because Putin is the kind of man who expects results. And if he doesn't get answers that are very clear, look no further than the fact that he mocked his own, secretary, diplomatic minister the other day. Where the guy got so nervous he started stuttering, and then Putin, mocked him by stuttering back at him to speak clearly. This guy, he wants results, and if you can't get it, he's either going to belittle you, kill you, or make you go somewhere where you will get killed.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, he's got 75,000 troops and support people still in reserve. Let's see. Squib says that he's not buying into conspiracy. Well, there isn't any so far. It's Saturday, but they aren't in Kiev or any other major city, so... they are in Kiev. See, the thing is they had crossed into the country 3 days ago. They were 105 miles away from Kiev. They pushed in from the north through Belarus. And then what ended up happening is they met resistance all the way down by Ukrainian military. They ended up having to take out their major airport and their major air base, so the civilian airport and the military air base, which was north of Kiev. They also decided to stop and take a little side trip and take over Chernobyl. And that was the thing that really made a lot of us kind of quirk an eyebrow and go, what the hell did you do that for?
And then radiation levels spiked.
And then there was a radiation level spike yesterday, which means they're messing around with or around the area of Chernobyl. Putin puts out a threat saying that if any Western civilization gets involved in this, that they will incur the wrath of a type of warfare never yet seen. Now, most people took that as a nuclear threat. I'm taking it as a nuclear waste threat, because that is something we've never seen. Squib says he's watching it live on camera. Where are they? The thing is right now, if you're watching the city live over there, you're watching it at 5:04 a.m. And the city has a curfew, so you probably don't see hardly anybody. The other problem is it's another part of the story that I haven't gotten to yet, but there's a thing that says that the Russian military are very ill-equipped right now, so they don't really have enough night vision goggles and stuff to actually do the ops at night, and most of their attacks have been at dusk or dawn, and the only nighttime attacks that have actually made any difference was with their Air Force. So chances are you're not going to see a lot of soldiers on the ground between the hours of midnight to 5 in the morning. If you see a giant explosion, it was probably a missile from a aircraft, because there's been pictures of blown out buildings and schools and freaking just high rises and things with giant holes in the sides of them. Those are missile attacks, but those are usually from aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so anyway, After that, that was what, 6 p.m. Ukraine time? 50 minutes later, the Ministry of Defense, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, claims that a Russian tank battalion commander survived a direct hit to his vehicle and was captured. They posted pictures of his military like ID and papers, his personal effects, and a photo of him being, bound up basically, and he did not look too well. But anyway, I know Squib, you're thinking of combat with an actual properly equipped and trained infantry, and I have a story that's coming up in this timestamp that Russian soldiers are either surrendering or they're dropping equipment because it doesn't work, or a lot of these soldiers are so green that they're not trained to use it properly, so they're just not running night ops. I know that sounds really stupid because you can do a lot of damage under the cover of night, and yet they're not. Because the problem is, they're not bringing tanks into the city because they lost, 15 of them in the first day to javelin attacks. If they got into the city, they would get javelined on the way in, and then they would get mortared or probably RPG'd from every rooftop on the way in, so they're just not doing it.
Oh, you're forgetting one other thing.
What's that?
Flaming containers.
Well, yeah, Mia Khalifa did that. So what Scott's bringing up is Mia Khalifa actually put on her social media the diagram on how to build a proper Molotov cocktail. If you don't know who that girl is, I'm not going to tell you what she used to do, but you gotta love her anyway. So, that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to elaborate on that part of that story. It's just people are sharing Molotov cocktail recipes. Let's just say that.
I read a story that an entire brewery has actually converted over to making them.
Molotov.
That is correct, and they're making it with thicker glass to make sure that the people who throw them don't get hurt by them.
Mm-hmm.
How nice of them to do such a thing. Anyway,
So nice.
let's see. So that was 6:50 p.m. Ukrainian time. They captured one of the largest tank battalions and one of the highest ranking commanders that day, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't know how to fight a war because it's an urban war. It's not a traditional one. Anyway, let's see. 10 minutes later, this news came in that Ukrainian parliament members were actually willing to push for more sanctions. And what they call, or then they demanded that they need a, quote, decisive decision on admitting Ukraine into both the EU and NATO membership. If you think about it, it is time for that, isn't it? Like, it's definitely time to do that, because everyone is saying the same thing. We would like to see a swift end to these hostilities. This is a war that nobody but Vladimir Putin wants. We need to discourage him from wanting to continue it, right? There's no faster way to stop him than to make him worry about the might of 30 nations against him. And the way you do that is you hold an emergency ballot and you admit the Ukraine into NATO. Because the only reason they haven't so far is because NATO has these
Stupid rules.
they have these intervals, and certain things need to be met on these certain intervals, and they haven't been met yet. So when you have time to do this the right way, then fine, you can hold these standards. But when you have a global superpower bearing down on this poor nation who is in the process of trying to meet these intervals, I think some corners are allowed to be cut. Possibly. Maybe.
No,
Definitely.
Russia's not a global superpower anymore either.
Well, okay.
They're
Historically and figuratively speaking. Geographically speaking, too, because they own freaking, a fifth of the world geographically? Anyway.
Largest single country on the planet.
Exactly. All right. So, at the same time, there was a story titled Way to Go Anonymous. Russians' Kremlin and Ministry of Defense websites were taken down on following large-scale cyber attacks. How large? Well, if you think about what it takes to do a DDoS attack on Amazon, think about how large their backbone network is. and they were able to take down Amazon Web Services before. Now think about Russians' Kremlin and Ministry of Defense. Imagine if Anonymous was trying to take down whitehouse.gov and every other .gov for the federal government. Like, it's a Herculean task. They took down the Kremlin and the Ministry of Defense sites. Like, it was child's play. I got a text message from a guy who was part of it, and he was like, get ready to watch the fireworks show. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, are you sure you don't want a piece of this action? I'm like, no, but I'll report it. And then the news broke 10 minutes after he sent me the text. I'm just like, oh, you sneaky bastard. So the reason that cyber attacks are becoming so important is because Russia's GPS system works on their own satellite network. They don't use ours. And there was a big concern originally that maybe they weren't as accurate as ours. So when they do like surgical strikes, that they might actually hit what they're aiming at. So far, you can see proof of either argument that yes, it is accurate, or no, it isn't. So who cares, right? But you want to clog up their communications, their logistics. You want to take away their GPS, and then you want to start crippling their infrastructure. If you can hack their like power grid and start shutting off substations, then you shut down all the core systems that they need to communicate, logistically, or to set up trucking like resupply routes and things, where you can mess with like their air traffic control. I mean, cyber warfare leading into kinetic warfare hand in hand, it's pretty devastating because we've become an electronic society. So yes, we have analog backups of it, but I think most societies and militaries now have become so comfortable with the convenience of electronics that it would take some time to get back to the analog if they had to in a pinch. So there's going to be this gray area of downtime, and that's where you do the most damage, is when everyone's like in disarray. Anyway, so yeah, the idea is if you emergency ballot and you get these guys into NATO, and the Russians are already in there, then Russia is now in violation of Article 5, which means any nation that inflicts damage towards a NATO nation now has to bear the wrath of all 30 major NATO nations. That would definitely piss Putin off, first of all, but then he would have to seriously reevaluate his game plan, because he'll be like, well, I'm just gonna go scorched earth on Ukraine then, to hell with all of this. But the fallout of what happens after that is something he's gonna have to calculate and see if he can stomach it, because what he's doing right now isn't even popular with his own people, but his military won't dare question it. They're like, no, I'm not going to the gulag.
Well, you didn't mention what else Anonymous was doing.
Go on.
Yeah.
Anonymous has been hacking their TV stations and
Yes,
showing
they have.
them showing the Russian people what the Russian military has been doing.
Correct. Russian state TV has outlawed the use of the word war, incursion, or invasion. So Anonymous hacked TV stations and started piping in feeds of the war, the invasion, and incursion. So the Russian people can actually see for themselves what's going on. And that actually works in concert with something else that the Russian military is doing to its own soldiers. But don't worry, we're about to get to that. So earlier I mentioned this. Sources on the ground have confirmed that Russia's equipment is either subpar, ineffective, or already broken, and their soldiers are very ill-trained and confused and limited with their night vision capabilities, and now most attacks are only occurring at dawn and dusk at low-light situations. So yeah, Squib's saying, urban warfare tactics, you go out there, you do your intel, you do patrols. It's not really for offense, you're just sort of feeling things out in the cover of darkness. They can't do that right now because they don't know what they're doing. And there's a reason why they don't know what they're doing either. And I will get to that. I wish I did this as part of the timestamp, but it's just one story came out before another and after the other. But just remember this one segment because it does tie into something else. So let's see. We covered up to 7 p.m. Half an hour later, a story was released. So it was 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, but 7:30 local time Ukraine. The International Criminal Court announced that they are now monitoring. Jesus, I'm interpreting what you're saying, Squib. Relax. The International Criminal Court is now monitoring Russia's invasion to Ukraine and building up war crimes charges and crimes against humanity charges for basically what's going to be an inevitable trial, upcoming trial. Whether, well, essentially Putin will not succeed. The world will not allow this. He's asking if they took the capital. No, they've been laying siege to the capital for 3 days. They're being met with pretty incredible resistance. So anyway, Al was saying that many of their ground troops are 18-year-olds with no plans for college who were told they were leaving for a training exercise. That's partly correct. There's more to that, and I will get to that. But you're definitely on the right track. And what happens on top of what you're saying to build off of that is pretty heinous. But you'll see soon. So 10 minutes after this story broke, Finland's U.S. ambassador basically publicly called out Russia's bluff on possible military action against Finland and Sweden. Because if you didn't know, Finland and Sweden sent in a special request to go ahead to be fast-tracked and admitted into NATO as well. And Russia turns around and said, "You do that and I'll attack you." Finland said,
"You really
"Bullshit."
want to try that again?"
Basically, Finland was like, "Bullshit." So anyway, they call Russia's bluff on military action against them if they pursue their admittance into NATO. And then, maybe it is time to consider adding any nation who wants to join as a thumb in the eye to Russia. Maybe it's time they reevaluate the requirements to join. Because right now, NATO is fighting for credibility anyway, right? I mean, people here in our country have been asking for years, what good are they? Like, what have you done lately, right? So, if they were in the business of reputation rebuilding, what better way to do that? Every country Russia says, "Don't you dare join NATO," that next day it would be like, "These countries are now part of NATO. Your move, Skeletor." Right?
Well, here's the other thing. You've got NATO countries that are already providing lethal aid to Ukraine.
Yes.
So what happens if Putin decides to go after them for doing that?
Well, then he would break Article 5.
Or what if he attacks, say, I don't know, a Polish convoy?
That would be in
Poland
violation.
is a NATO member.
That's a gray area, you see, because the thing is he didn't attack the country. He had just attacked representatives of that country who are in the territory of a non-NATO nation. That sort of negates their protection status, I guess.
Hold on.
One could argue that.
Hold on. Couldn't one also argue that if Russia is attacking Kiev, if they attack embassies, aren't they technically attacking foreign soil?
Yes, they are.
Yes, but the problem with that is before the Russians actually invaded, there were orders to clear embassies before any hostilities began. So they're basically just empty buildings.
But they're still foreign soil.
They are, but if they don't actually shell the foreign soil building and they just walk right past it, then there's not really anything you can do about it. I know what you're saying, and it makes sense, but what I'm basically pointing out is certain pieces on a checkerboard can't go forward and backward. They can only go at angles, right? And the Russians will just move at angles. They'll just say, skip that one building. We don't want to. If you, like, I bet they were given specific instructions with like maps that had circles
of where they could attack and where they couldn't.
Yeah. Like, they probably grease penciled it, and they were just like, "Nyet, can't go there, nyet, can't go there, nyet, don't go there." Stuff like that. Squib says that this is not a video game. I'm very well aware of that. And I'm also aware that war doesn't work like Call of Duty. I get that. But we're just reading what's already happening out there. I'm not trying to interject opinion on what I think should be done there. Like, that's up for those commanders, not me. I'm not their leader. So anyway, moving right along. Let's see. Oh, so by 8 p.m. Ukrainian local time, most Ukrainian TV were showing off like videos of other countries working in solidarity or in support of them. So they were showing off that there were anti-protests springing up all across the world, like Tokyo, London, strangely enough, Taipei, Taiwan.
Really?
Yeah. Taiwan, anti-war protest, supports Ukraine. Like, okay. Like, you guys have your own problems right now. You sure you really want to do that?
It's
far
kind of a
away.
bad
Are you-
time to be doing that.
That's a little far away. Are you sure? You guys should be saying something about that?
Well, it's not that. It's just they got their own problems to worry about. I mean, they live on an island that is within range of rocket artillery of the Chinese mainland. Don't think I'd be out in public right now. Anyway.
What's this month again? February?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we're
for
still in
another 2
February.
days.
Remind me, when was the oh shit, it was December, wasn't it? The Hong Kong protest.
Mm.
Yeah, that was a couple years back. I remember that when that kicked off.
Yeah, now they own it. All right. Also around 8 p.m. I wrote this in acronyms because I was in a hurry. 8 p.m. UK local time. Also, Israeli satellites caught the image of a traffic jam leading out of the Ukraine into Poland that was 4 miles long. Like, it's just a log jam. Everyone's trying to get the hell out. Like, it was in black and white because it's nighttime.
They don't want to get killed by Russians. That's why.
Squib says Taiwan versus China. My money is on Taiwan. We sort of touched on this, but
I mean, Squib, if you really want to bet like that, go for it. But it's just one island.
2.
Well, yeah, 2. You're right.
One big, one little. I don't know. I'd love to hear why, but anyway, 4-mile long traffic jam of people leaving the country. The original statistic as of today, let's see, did I put that up here above this? I think I did. I've got the latest numbers up there. I think it was like 116,000. Pretty sure that's what it was, about 116,000. Air raids continued post-curfew into the third night of invasions. You were getting reports of explosions and just, fire bombings and the sounds of jets overhead and all this other stuff. That was around 8:44, so right after the sun sets, that's when usually the Russian infantry and artillery units, they strike for a little while just after the sun goes down, and then usually hours after that, it's going to be airstrikes. At least that's been what's been going on for the last 2 or 3 days. So at this point, the reason I wrote that in there is because there's all these little segments of different people showing videos with a clock, showing you the timestamp, and you would hear like the air raid sirens, or they would put the camera over and you would see like a building explode off into the distance, or you would see this bright flash, things like that. So there was a lot of aerial activity at night over there, which would have been just after lunchtime for me here, but that's when I got to sit there and watch it, and I was just like, wow, that's one hell of a fireworks show they got going on. All right,
Wow, HBS is out there.
so the thing that Al was talking about for most of the soldiers that were being brought down there, saying that they were just going in for a military training exercise, there's a story that was written, and there was interviews being conducted, and I'm pretty sure these soldiers are probably going to get punished for it, that Russian military contracts included a gag order of all conscripted soldiers. So draftees, right? That's what conscription is. They included a gag order for all conscripted soldiers to cut off all communications with their own families. Draftees were literally being hauled away and forced into contract military service. So they say. Like some of the soldiers were interviewed, and they were just like, "We're not allowed to talk to our families. We're not allowed to tell them where we're going, and we, get rushed off into trucks and sent off to wherever they're sending us." That doesn't sound like an elite kind of unit, to have people like that getting sent in. Oh, and aloha to HVS, who is jumped in the chat. That is. So anyway, yeah, they're conscripting soldiers, and apparently they're silencing them, and then they just throw them in trucks and send them off. Maybe that's why they don't know how to use the NVGs they were given. Maybe that's why they're not doing middle-of-the-night operations.
Are you
On the
sure they
ground.
didn't send any
Maybe that's why they're doing so
IL-76s
bad.
too?
I don't know. We did this stupid joke yesterday that was saying like their night vision goggles don't work, so they unscrew the lenses and then they send soldiers out to go pick up fireflies and then stick them in there and put their helmets back on. It's all dumb jokes. Anyway,
Is that why some of those tanks that were seen on TikTok being disabled and left there? Is
I
that
don't
why?
know. I don't know. See, like a modern combat tank, you would think has night vision. It also has infrared vision. You can usually tell by seeing the optic like hanging off the side of the
And
cupola. It'll either be like, well, the American ones back in the day were like square or rectangular shape, but they've obviously gotten smaller and rounder. I know the ones that you'd see on like T62 and T72, it would be a round one. It wasn't very big, but it didn't have to be. But I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't really seen a lot of armored video or images of armored tanks, except there was a couple of stock photos of them crossing into the fields, across snow and stuff like that. But
Well,
you would think that
the,
was just like a clip for like state TV or whatever.
the only videos I've seen are either TikTok or some videos I've seen on news channels where they show like a couple tanks that were just left there with uniforms on the floor,
Hmm.
or any troop carriers that were also like just left there with clothes, or some of them were like disabled due to, I guess I'm assuming, no gas.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. No,
That's
there's
the other
some
thing.
have
Their
run out of gas.
logistics are fucked.
Yeah, some of them had actually run out of gas. Some of them had actually just abandoned their vehicles and just quit, like defected or just surrendered or just, we're not doing this shit. There's stories of that all over. You see, Squib's correct in one thing. You shouldn't trust the mass media, right? But you can sort of paint a picture based off of all the different kaleidoscope of social media posts and people on the ground or just everyday people with their camera out. That's one thing that this does differently than traditional war is there's so many more eyes on the ground now. And there's so much more access.
Everybody's got a camera.
Right, and there's so much more access out to the World Wide Web for the rest of the world to take it all in, which is one of the reasons why Russia's cracking down so hard on social media, because they don't want the Russian people to see the opposite of what they have been told by their elected or by their leadership. They were like, we are
So,
doing this because the Ukrainians are creating genocide, for Russian separatists or whatever, where there's
so
no proof of it.
in other words, they're basically indoctrinating them from
Yeah,
the start.
of course. I mean, this is a guy who wants to bring back the Cold War. This is a guy who wants the map to look like it did in 1986. So it would stand to reason that.
No, it wouldn't
So
be a
if you
surprise.
go to
Yeah, go ahead. It wouldn't be a surprise also to say you've been lying to about the United States. Like, oh, the West is evil. Evil, don't go to them.
Yeah.
We're not evil.
if you go to Reddit, the R combat footage and R Ukrainian war video report are excellent sources of videos of what's actually going down.
Well, okay, so I think Squib's trying to play a bit of devil's advocate, which is good, but a lot of these people, like he's saying, they don't know how to fight a war, and they're just describing what they see. And sometimes it gets misconstrued as, well, I saw it, therefore it is, right? But
No, but video doesn't lie either.
Well, the
So
video
you can
of
see
Yes and no. Yes and no.
armored vehicles.
the video of
And you
the
can
tank crew jumping
say,
out of the
okay, that's
tank
a
saying they're out of
T-72.
gas, there's no denying that.
No, but what I'm saying is you can see what kind of equipment the Russians are using. And
Sure.
the quality of their
Obviously,
equipment.
yeah, obviously.
And
But
from what I've been seeing, they're still using Cold War era shit that's in pretty poor condition.
like, how bad are we talking on the degree of the equipment? Are we
A
talking
lot
like
of the Ukrainian equipment is more modern.
so the
than
Russian
what the
stuff's like
Russians are
probably
throwing at
configured?
them. The problem with conscript armies are you're not going to give them the vast majority of those troops are not going to have the good equipment.
No, they're not having
They're going to have
the latest
shitty
and
equipment.
greatest is only used for those that defend the actual country in the country. They're not going to send that out of the country.
You know, it's funny you mention that. Sean, remind me. Didn't the Georgians have a conflict with Russia and it only lasted a couple years? Back in 2008.
Yes.
Was that the same concept where they had tanks that were like really outdated and stuff?
Well, see, I can't theorize on this because think about it like this. We were talking about how China, for instance, right? They were sort of, well, even the Russians. We had stories for months about how Russian airplanes would fly into U.S. airspace over Alaska, right? And what they were doing is they were kind of like probing to see what our response time is and things like that. And the Chinese were sort of doing the same thing over Taiwan recently, right? And this is where I'm going to tiptoe into a segment sponsored by Reynolds Wrap. So if there was any conspiracy theory here, this is where I'm going to give you one. Russia never took Ukraine as a serious threat, right? Like, they've said that before. They thought that they would have Kiev down on a
On the first
knee
day.
in 48 hours. And yet, we're already 3.5 days into this. And they're frustrated, and they're ineffective, and they're not getting their way, right? Here's a theory. Now, I'm just take it at face value. I'm not saying it is the gospel or whatever, but if I was going into a country as like a warm-up to a bigger conflict later, maybe I would just send in my seconds and my hand-me-downs and my inexperienced guys into a conflict that I thought was a cakewalk, because I didn't have to give them my best stuff. And should they have failed in that cakewalk, nothing really militarily important equipment-wise got captured and reverse engineered. Like, what if he really thought that he could walk through the Ukraine with 30-year-old shit and take it over in 48 hours?
He did. I think he didn't expect. I think he expected the Ukrainians just to welcome him with open arms.
Right, but like, remember we were talking about the T-14 Armada? And we were probably like, well, they only made like less than 100, and they're still using like the T-92s or whatever. They're also using artillery pieces that are still based off of the T-62. Like, the chassis is undeniable. You can see it. But the thing is like, he sends his junk down there, and if he can take out the Ukraine with his old stuff, first of all, he'll brag how easy it was because he used outdated technology with young, inexperienced soldiers, and he was able to steamroll it, right? That's kind of a bragging right. Plus, he gets to keep all his actual good stuff in reserve when he wants to go hit the Baltic states and start pushing into Poland, if that's his real intent.
If he does that, he's going to be kicking off something that he's going to be regretting.
Well, I know, like, Putin moved a ton of their new top-of-the-line hypersonic missiles to the border with China. Because China's been demanding a certain city back from Russia.
They're not getting Vladivostok. Just get that out of your head.
I know. Why
Ever.
he moved that
Ever.
to all the top-of-the-line weapons to that border.
I don't know. I can't explain it. But they're never... Russia's never giving up their sub base for the Pacific Fleet. Ever. Like, just forget that.
But that's why he moved those top-of-the-line weapons as a message to China saying, don't even fucking think about it.
Well, okay, look at it this way. If China really wanted to have a Pacific Fleet base, right? And they wanted it originally where Vladivostok is, but the Russians are already like, no, that's ours. Fuck off. Get your own peninsula. No, seriously. If they said something like that, then China would just be like, fuck it, we'll just take Korea. Just a thought. I'm not saying it's what's actually happening. It's just like they're not getting Vladivostok. I'm just telling you right now,
I
it's
know
not going to
that.
happen ever.
I'm not saying they do, but they want it.
They want it. They're just not going to have it. I want Lily Jane or Lily Adams, and I'm never going to have that. So just no.
Which is why he moved those weapons systems, which is top line, state of the art, to the border with China as a do not fucking even think about it warning.
I don't know. All I know is their gentleman's agreement is we're going west, you're going east. Cool. You know, like that was pretty obvious. All right, let's move on. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Okay. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby. This came to me as a bit of a surprise because John Kirby had a press conference yesterday and he didn't say anything. He came up there and he was like, okay, this is the Pentagon briefing. And they're like, I have nothing new to tell you people, but I'll take questions anyway. And none of the questions he had answers for. So it was a really short conference. Today, 2:06 p.m. Central Standard Time. So that would have been 10 p.m. Ukrainian local time. John Kirby announces that all Russian allegations that the U.S. was involved in naval operations with the Ukraine are false.
Ooh.
Kind of a shame, because the Seawolf is there. They're there. I mean, the Seawolf got picked up on sonar, and the Russians started to track it, and it got away. So, it's definitely there, and it's not the only one there. But, yeah, he's saying that we had naval operations with the Ukraine. I think he's right. I don't think we ever claimed to have done that. We were just kind of watching and listening. That's kind of what we do. Anyway, he finally at least said something.
Wherever they go.
I'm just glad he finally said something. Because I mean, he hasn't said anything
Kind of
about.
like our submarines follow their submarines. Their submarines try to follow our submarines.
Sometimes they do. Most of the time they don't. Sometimes they do.
Every once in a while, our submarines kind of whack each other.
Sometimes we just run into a South China Sea seamount. Anyway, let's see. 2:26. So 20 minutes later, President Zelensky had concluded a call with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson regarding the situation on the ground, further continuing efforts to isolate diplomatically and financially Russians, as well as their need to hold to account the actions of Belarus. Now, this is actually a pretty neat little tidbit. So what he's basically saying is he's trying to encourage the UK to sort of push the EU into pressuring Belarus because they're sort of a co-conspirator to this invasion, right? We know that Belarus's leadership is a puppet government to Vladimir Putin. Like, we know that. It's like the worst kept secret in geopolitics. But the fact that he had allowed almost over 20,000 troops, Russian troops, to occupy his country as a jump-off point to his invasion, that makes you a co-conspirator.
Let's also not forget it. He left a whole bunch of Middle Eastern refugees over next to the Polish border.
Would I really trust a British politician named Boris? Yes, I would. Because
yes, you would.
I knew who he was before he was Prime Minister. I knew who he was before he was the Mayor of London. And the guy is incredibly intelligent and absolutely qualified for that job. Like, absolutely qualified for that job. He's probably one of the better Prime Ministers they've had. Because, first of all, he's not a hothead. He's very, very analytical. He looks goofy, and he sounds kind of funny when he talks, and that I think that gives other leaders a false sense of superiority. They're like, this guy's an idiot, but he knows what he's doing. The guy knows what he's doing. So yes, you can trust a politician named Boris, because he's not married to a Natasha.
Honestly, I would trust a British politician more than an American one right now.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Boris Johnson's like a modern day Winston Churchill. He's half American.
How about
Is
the
that why his hair is like that?
Canadian politicians too, Scott? Would you trust some of them? The
No.
Conservative Party?
Oh,
No.
hell no.
No,
The
because
Conservative Party, I said.
oh, yes, maybe a little
Maybe.
more than
We'll see.
more than the ruling party. Yes. All right. So anyway, yeah. So basically, Zelensky was pushing Boris Johnson. They were talking about isolating Russia more diplomatically, more financially. He wants them to hold Russia into account. He also wants to put in sanctions and put the pressure on and turn the screws on Belarus. So he said that you can expect another wave of sanctions to begin to come down on accessories to war nations such as them and Moldova, because Moldova had like 9,000 troops, Russian troops in their country too. All right, let's see. 9 minutes after that story had broke, there was confirmation that the Kremlin had begun blocking IP addresses and access to Twitter to silence the voices of fellow Russians that were against the war with the Ukraine. So they're basically pulling like China. They're pulling the plug on any outbound traffic to Twitter or inbound traffic from Twitter. They were like, nope, we're turning this off. Let's see. 11 minutes after that story came out, there was an update. This would have been 11:15 Ukrainian time. That UN's High Commissioner for Refugees. Okay, so here's the numbers. They reported that an estimated 116,000 Ukrainians so far have entered Poland. This is everybody who has come in ahead of that 4-mile-long traffic jam. So they're still doing head counts. Let's see. And they're also estimating, so it was 116,000 Ukrainians have entered Poland and, strangely enough, Moldova. So
Why would they go to Moldova?
why would they
when the
go to a
Russians are-
place where 9,000 Russian troops came in from? That means you can't trust the people that are taking you in. It's just kind of a funny thing.
And I joked earlier about that. Maybe they were, what is it, sleepers.
No, maybe the Ukrainians think there's enough people that could go there to affect change.
Yeah, right.
All right.
100,000 people?
So anyway, 15 minutes
Yeah,
after that,
oh.
this is the best. I think this is probably the best story of the day. And I'm going to tell a joke in the middle of it, so please bear with me because it actually is kind of funny. 10:59 p.m. Ukraine time. So it would have been Russia's midnight, slightly over, a little further over. Parts of Russia are still the same time as Ukraine, but a little further in, it's already midnight. YouTube drops the hammer on Russia at what would have been midnight their time. And they demonetized Russia Today and all major Russian media channels that are on YouTube to prevent a single cent, or I guess a single ruble, of ad revenue generation. YouTube algorithms finally being used for good instead of perpetuating the evil of demonetization.
I gave you that one.
You did give me that one. Basically, I think somebody at YouTube decided to go into the algorithm and they looked up 2A or gun control, and they just erased that and put the word Russia in there, and then they sent the algorithm off, and it just crushed them.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia Today was one of their bigger outlets. It got demonetized instantly. Finally, the right people are getting shut off. Maybe they should have just bumped up their rules saying you had to have 50,000 subs to get monetized. Because that would put, that would put you back into no monetization.
You shut your mouth. Shut your mouth.
All right. So now we're crossing into what will be Sunday for Ukraine. But for me, it was still today. So I'm just still going to count it as day 3. But I think what I'll do is tomorrow I'll just sort of quickly just bish bash bosh through these because they were part of their day 4. But for the rest of us, it was about 4:25 Central Time. A story broke, or actually not a story. This was actual satellite images that were released, which would have been 12:25 a.m. local Ukrainian Sunday morning, right? Satellite images were shown that Russian ground forces were amassing and approaching a town called Nova Kakhovka. And the significance of that is twofold. So I think Squib will probably agree to this. In an urban warfare environment, you want to take away the enemy's ability to produce war, or to perpetuate war, or to be able to fight the war. And you do that by surgical strikes. You take out like military installations, radar, communications, and when you're done with that and you knock out their air defenses and you knock out their air force, now they can't stop you in the air. I mean, yeah, okay, javelins and missiles and SAMs and things like that, sure. But you don't have airplane, plane versus plane, stuff like that, right? Once you knock out that, then the next stage of your conquest is to start taking out infrastructure, power, water, logistics, shipyards, docks, things like that, right? Well, Nova Kakova, that holds the largest river port on the Dnieper River, which feeds right up the middle of the Ukraine, more or less. So it's got a big port, which we're committing $350 billion more military aid for the Ukraine. And the only way we're going to get it there is either by air or by sea, right? Maybe by truck. Maybe, like I was jokingly saying, we drop it off in Poland and they take it across for us. Whatever. But they took out, or they're approaching this town. They're going to lay siege to it because they want to knock out the country's largest river port. And infrastructure-wise, they're trying to knock out the hydroelectric plant there too, because that's when one of their largest dams and hydroelectric plants are. So that was at 12:30 in the morning. So they weren't actually starting the battle, but they were amassing the troops to get ready to make an advance. And that was 12:30 a.m. So despite the fact that they're not running night ops in the traditional sense, they are getting ready for an operation that's probably going to be at like the crack of dawn kind of a thing, because obviously that's when they can start to see what the hell they're doing. 4 minutes after that, four, the world got it, finally. Like, we got it. We figured it out, right? So, what is it? Almost 12 hours prior? No, 14 hours prior, we had Italy and Cyprus agree to not get in the way of expelling Russia from SWIFT. Well, at 12:29 a.m., so 12:30 Ukrainian time in the morning, the U.S., Canada, and all European allies finally agreed to expel the Russian banks from SWIFT. So, yay, finally. Like, they just basically said, okay, you can't do this anymore. And he says they're taking too long, it's going to cost them. Yeah, you're right, it will. Because if they can see you doing it, they'll know what to do to stop you. Or they'll put in countermeasures in place now to provide a very stiff resistance to this. Sure. Like, definitely. All right, let's see. We're almost done, actually. We're not going to do 2.5 hours today. Yay.
Yay.
Let's see. So 6:35 p.m., which would have been 2 hours later, 2:35 a.m. Ukrainian time. Russian Air Force. Russian missile hits the oil depot near Kiev. One of the people in their parliament were tweeting out, it's an ecological disaster because the whole place is on fire. There's probably oil everywhere. Draw your own conclusions. But they hit the largest oil depot near Kiev. And yeah, that's what it was. Parliament member Anna Pertova pleads with the U.S. and EU to vote to make Ukraine and in the entire state of or country of Ukraine to be a no-fly zone, because the Ukrainian Air Force isn't completely wiped out, but they clearly can't stop every night operation for the Russian Air Force. So now that what they're saying is why don't you just make our whole country a no-fly zone, because that now makes it a violation for Russia to do that, and you can just start adding charges to your war crimes rap sheet for them. I mean, it's not going to stop them, but it's just a bunch of and ones, right?
Something to add on at the end when it's all said and done.
Exactly. Let's see. Here we go. About an hour after that, so it'd be 3:30 a.m. But it was 7:29 our time, so we're talking prime time Saturday night. Donald Trump relieves a statement saying that he thinks, or he's warning, that World War could be next as Russia's continuation of the Ukraine drags on. And
Days ago?
well, it was reported today, so he's probably expanding on his original statement. And I think what it is he's basically saying the same thing we've been saying. People are gonna start choosing sides, and this is gonna drag out into an opinion war. And the longer Russia gets to keep doing this, the more people have time to build up coalition. So I guess he's just being Captain Obvious at this point, right?
Well, I've been hearing that air defense units have been pouring into Ukraine from Poland.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good for the Russians.
See, I like HVS's answer better than a no-fly zone. You put up enough Stinger missiles, you don't need a declaration for a no-fly zone.
Exactly.
You just basically porcupine the air with Stingers.
No.
You could do that. I mean, we couldn't do it. They could do it.
We sell up to other countries.
Let's
too,
just send a bunch of Polish trucks with a bunch of Stingers with our regards.
Well,
it'll be great.
Well, we have massive stockpiles of weapons pre-positioned all over Europe.
Yeah, Germany, Poland, Greece. I think we have something in Greece.
Some of the other more Eastern European countries and Western European countries.
I cannot confirm nor deny that.
World War III kind of stockpiles.
I cannot confirm nor deny that.
Greece is part of NATO, so
I just remember that one of Putin's major sticking points was he didn't want the Ukraine to be admitted into NATO, because that would give NATO the justification to put medium to long range missiles within an earshot of Moscow. He did not like that. He took that as a direct threat. He goes, if you put those right there, I have to defend myself. And we're like, wait a minute. They just want to be in NATO. We didn't say we were going to park a bunch of missiles there. And he just sort of gave me this look of, like Putin's like, you're going to put him in a NATO and you're not going to put in missiles? How stupid do you think I am? So...
Oh, and to answer Squib, yes, Stingers have a limited range, but they also have a nice prize.
Huh? Oh.
Being man-portable, they're very, very mobile. Because Squib commented that Stingers have limited range.
Sure.
But they're also highly mobile, which... Yes, they have limited range, but you can also move them around really fast.
This is part of that thing that if Ukraine was part of NATO, then the Ukrainian Air Force wouldn't have to be defending their air by themselves. And I don't think they have enough surface to air missiles to really stop them anyway. And they've probably had enough of their radar and electronic, guidance systems beat to shit by the Russians during their invasion, that they probably can't. By the time they see them, they won't be able to lock onto them in time because they'll be gone. You know what I mean? It's like if you've ever been to like an NHRA event and you just see a car doing 300 and something miles an hour past you, which is like there and gone, right? If you're holding a man portable missile and you're like, I hear a jet, but we can't really see it because all our communications are down, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, no, I see a tail light back there. it's going to be gone before you even recognize what the hell it is. So maybe it's not the best way to do it.
Well, the other problem with manpads are, unless you're sure that it's not one of your jets,
Exactly.
you might hesitate a little bit to shoot it.
I don't know. I'm not shooting down planes with missiles, so I'm not even going to try to guess what that's like.
No idea.
All right, let's see. So, a guy who's not just a Pierre Cardin model, President Macron, requested that Lukashenko demand withdrawal of all Russian troops from Belarusian soil as quickly as possible, as these troops are waging a unilateral and unjust war. Yes, he's right, actually. Stingers have identity friend or foe. So, for the person shooting it, the weapon will take care of it for you, I guess, is what he's basically telling you. So yeah, so now the French are telling, this is part of that whole, we need to start holding the accessories to war and the co-conspirators to war accountable. Now the French are basically telling Belarus, get all the Russian troops out or you're next. That's the only thing I can think of.
Lukashenko is just going to ignore them because
Of course
he's
he
a puppet.
is. All right, so... Oh, wait, shit, okay, there was a timestamp to that. It was 7:50 p.m. Central Time, 4 a.m. Ukrainian time, and it says, French President Macron asks Belarusian President to demand Russian troops leave. He made a point of denouncing the seriousness of a decision which would authorize Russia to deploy nuclear weapons on Belarusian soil. A readout of the call provided by the presidential palace said, Macron requested that he demands the withdrawal of all Russian troops from Belarusian soil as quickly as possible, as these troops are waging a unilateral and unjust war. That's the part I was getting at. See, and I guess my only bone of contention with Squibb right now is he seems to think that every war is fought the same way every time. And there's a lot of similarities, but there are also a lot of differences between each conflict, right? That's fair to say.
How's the old saying go?
No. We were saying what's old is new again, but that's not the same thing.
No, it's not. But I'm saying most militaries are prepared to fight the last war.
Oh, yeah, because they don't know what they're going to deal with in the next one. They have a good idea, but...
Everything evolves.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like what we talked about earlier, the equipment they brought into the Ukraine, it's from last war or even wars before, right? It's old stuff. They haven't built enough T-14 Armadas, even though they claim that is their standard battle tank. They don't have very many of them.
They brought in T-90s,
They can't afford
which are basically upgraded T-72s. They aren't that great.
No, those ones, if you hit them with a javelin, off the top.
There's a video that was put out an hour ago, and it was the Ukrainian government telegram. The Ukrainian government telegram channel claimed that Russian forces blew up a gas pipeline in Kharkiv early Sunday morning. They clarified immediately and said that the blast was not the result of a nuclear strike, despite the appearance of one. I guess it mushroom clouded because it's gas, right?
Yeah.
It was a big boom, big bada boom.
Yeah, big bada boom.
So
Bada boom.
That was actually the latest update in terms of things that are happening over there. So an hour ago would have put that at 9 p.m. So you figure, what, 7? That'd be 5 a.m. over there. So pretty soon it's going to get to the point where the daylight's going to start to kick in. I really don't want to speculate on this, but I think that by this time tomorrow we'll be telling the story about that incursion into Nova Kakhovka, and if they actually took out the hydroelectric plant or if they had taken over the river port. I think we'll probably hear more about that tomorrow. But so far, like Squib was saying, Kiev still has not fallen. Their military is still providing pretty stiff resistance. And, truth be told, you're not really hearing about a lot of fighting in that city right now. He's right.
No.
He's very right about that. I mean, when you were seeing like the Bosnian and Croatian conflicts, right? There were tons of video of street to street fighting. Like we saw tons of it. This one you're not
That's
really
'cause I
seeing
think the
that.
I think the Ukrainians have actually pushed them back away from the city. That's why you're not seeing any fighting.
I'm still of the opinion that they're not pushing their armor into the city.
It's
Because
possible. 'Cause
moving
they
a
know
tank
the
through narrow
Ukrainians are ready
streets
for 'em.
is a fool's errand. It really is. Like they didn't actually
Protect
disclose
them with
if they brought artillery over the border. They brought tanks over, but
Mhm.
I don't know if they actually brought artillery over
pictures.
in the north.
They brought artillery. They brought
They had 150 attack helicopters
large
last night.
large caliber mortar systems, like 205 millimeter mortars.
Yeah.
That's a huge freaking mortar.
Well, I mean, it's almost the size of the old British flying dustbin from the
Well, think of it
AVREs.
this way: our standard, this is 155 millimeter.
Right, but like the AVRE, I think it was a 405 millimeter spigot mortar. It was put on the end of a Churchill tank. Basically,
Yeah,
it's a siege mortar. Or in the British case, it was made to take down fortifications so they can push armor through, like
yeah, bunkers,
concrete walls and
bunker
bunkers
buster.
and things like that. Yeah, it was like the ground fired bunker buster of its day, essentially. Anyway, there's a fight going on in chat about if the country's going to be okay. Ours. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I got to thank Biden to the tune of like $68 yesterday. I was pretty pissed.
Biden falls upstairs instead of down. That's the only falling Biden does.
Squib, the
Yeah, the only
problem.
way.
Wait, I gotta put this in here. The problem with driving tanks down narrow streets is maneuverability when you start getting attacked from the buildings above you. Tanks are a sitting
Well,
duck because number one, they can't elevate the guns high enough. Number
Eh,
two, most people are not going to be manning that coaxial machine gun because they're going to get picked off. Like that's the worst parts of urban warfare. And I know you're going to say
well,
it's not like
but
Call
that's
of Duty, and I agree with you, but there was a very, very, very accurate movie put out called Lebanon, and it showed a horrible tank battle in an urban environment. And these poor bastards got isolated, and they got tore up just by regular people dropping Molotovs and like mortaring them and RPGing them. It's like they're not willing to take that risk right now, which is why they haven't pushed that far into the city with their armor. Now, granted, they might be coming in with like APCs, maybe, but they're still just as vulnerable too. Like,
more vulnerable. They have
actually,
lighter
you're
armor.
right. They're not as armored because they were never intended to take a hit from a tank. So yeah, small arms, maybe like I don't know, anti-tank rifle type, stuff like that, shit like that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But the only way you got to bring tanks into a city or even armored personnel carriers is boots on the ground.
no, he's right, and
You
he was saying
gotta
that
have
too.
infantry.
He was saying that too. He was like, "Look,
Otherwise,
you
they're
can
gonna
roll
get
tanks into
fucking
town."
decimated.
Yeah, he was like, "You can roll tanks into towns, but you better have infantry support." And he's absolutely right. He is right about that. It's just I don't think they're that coordinated right now. They must be very poorly coordinated. They
Yeah,
have to be.
it's conscript troops. That's why.
Yeah, young kids, and like you
You know,
said, some
who've been
outdated
training for
equipment,
years.
and a lot of them were lied to about where they were going or what they were doing. And now all of a sudden it's like, nope, get in there. Well, you're going into Ukraine. It's like, wait, I thought this was a training exercise. Well, the training just got real, comrade. That's basically what they're telling them, right? Strap up, you're going in. That kind of thing. No tanks, no Russian. There was actually a very famous mission called No Russian. Just saying. Anyway,
Certain Molotov cocktails to the exhaust or engine grills will do wonders to kill enemy vehicles.
I would love to talk about the merits of tanks and warfares and gun depression and hull down and all that other stuff right now, but I think you guys have put up with this enough for one night on a weekend. Probably. I love
Can we
that.
send Nicholas Moran to go train the Ukrainians?
I think we should send. No, I think we should send. We should just send Kyle Rittenhouse.
Oof.
Let's just send him to go train the Ukrainians on how to take out Russians.
He's busy trying to take down the media instead.
That's true. He's going to be one of the richest men on earth. I'm telling you right now.
Leave him alone.
Yes, and as Fine8 pointed this out, and I think Night Strike pointed this out as well. They have found discarded canister shot shells, which you're
They've
right.
also found cluster munitions,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
which are illegal.
right, but you
But
know
when the Russians care about legality.
exactly. I've been
No.
telling you this for the longest time.
Legality's out the window with Russia.
In every conflict that we have ever been involved in, and this conflict that we are technically not involved in, the attacker has never abided by the rules of the Hague Convention. So, what's the point of having it? Oh, I know. And ones. That's what it always is. It's and ones. And with that, I'm going to play this. Because I said I wasn't going to do this for 2 hours tonight. It's Saturday night. Y'all have things to do. I have things to do. I have more stories to try to pick up so we can do this again tomorrow. I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us babble on about day 3 of the Russian incursion into the Ukraine. And I promise we will try to take this a little bit more seriously. I just wanted to kind of lighten it up compared to the last 2 days.
Yeah,
If you're
it's
new to
been
my
pretty
channel, welcome. If you're a regular here, welcome back. Just hit the like and subscribe buttons and stuff, and maybe check out my other playlists and see if those interests of mine might be interesting to you. Thank you all for watching. We will be back tomorrow for more of The War Room.